Welcome to the Cannabis Industry Growth Series, where we explore business opportunities in the burgeoning post-prohibition cannabis industry on Cannabis10x.com. I'm Jason Trove, and in this episode, I interviewed the VP of Franchise Development for the cannabis dispensary franchise called One Cannabis. One Cannabis is the first United States-based franchise that you can buy for a cannabis dispensary that is vertically integrated. What that means is that they own their entire supply chain. So they have their own grow facility, in this case, 118,000 square feet. Justin was nice enough to give the listeners of this podcast a free gift to come out and tour the grow facility on him. It's a $500 voucher towards your travel, room and board, and you'll meet the team and take a look at the franchise model and tour one of their other dispensaries as well as their grow facility. You can find that voucher on our website at Cannabis10x.com/weed franchise, WEED franchise. So what was interesting is Justin shared his history in franchising, and he was previously in franchise development for Coyote Ugly. Now, if you've ever seen the box office hit movie, you know that the marketing on that franchise is incredible. Most don't get a box office movie, and it's a very entertainment-based franchise. So we had a discussion about where that's going to go now that he's turned his focus on cannabis franchises. This team actually has about 30 combined years in franchising, and they're teamed with one of the first dispensaries that ever came out of Colorado. So ideally, if you've got the knowledge of how to run a retail location or how to run franchises for that matter and want to step right into a cannabis operation without the learning curve, this is an enticing play. You're buying a running dispensary, so you're stepping into a cash-flowing business with an expert team at your side and just accelerating the learning curve. It's a great way to go if you can afford to get into it. Now, it's a good idea to have some experience as a multi-unit owner with retail background or experience running stores, retail storefronts. And financially speaking, it's a big game to get into, so you'll need a cash reserve to the tune of 7 figures liquid. Since it's still federally illegal, you can't just get an SBA loan for this, so it's an all-cash purchase. After a few conversations with Justin, he actually quoted the earnings claims in the franchise disclosure document at the time of this recording. So you're going to hear what the revenue of a single location is and what the profit margins are. And it is unbelievable what you can make in one cannabis dispensary right now. So the opportunity is incredible. Without spoiling it, I'm going to leave it to Justin. I present to you Justin Livingston of One Cannabis Franchise.
Obviously, you're pretty much, I think, the only United States-based franchise for retail cannabis dispensaries. Is that right?
That's right.
All right. Well, let's start with you saying who you are and what you do.
So, Justin Livingston with One Cannabis Group. I'm in charge of all of the franchising. So we combine kind of the cannabis and the franchise industry first to really fully do that. There's a couple of us franchise guys, myself and Mike Weinberger, who's the COO, and then a really robust team on the cannabis side of things. My job is to develop the programming for franchising and then help to market and find the perfect franchise partner.
So that's interesting. And your background is you came from, is that Coyote Ugly?
Most recently, Coyote Ugly. Yep. So I'm trying to think now, 15 years, I think, or so in franchising. Started off doing domestic development for the Maui Wow Wine Coffee Smoothie chain, and then moved to do their international development. Have a consulting company called Franchise Transformation that focuses on helping independent concepts become franchises, probably the biggest of which right now, Ziggy's Coffee. Then went to the Vice President of Global Development for Coyote Ugly, where I developed their franchise program for international expansion, and now here as the VP of Franchise Development for One.
Yeah, that's impressive. So when I think of, Coyote Ugly and cannabis retail dispensary franchises, I my head goes all the way. I mean, there's a movie, isn't that movie for Coyote Ugly, and there's a Vegas spot where the bartenders dance on the bar, and it sounds it's just one of the most entertaining franchise concepts I've come across. and now we're that's a bar. Now we're talking about cannabis, and when you get legal cannabis, and I guess Corona beer is getting into, they're $4 billion into the investment with Canopy Growth, right? They almost pretty much control Canopy Growth at this point, which, as I understand, is the largest player in the whole field right now. So what I'm wondering is where is all of that headed? What kind of in the future, what do you see these ending up like? Are they going to stay, like people line up and get their sort of medical packet or whatever, or is it going to be more like a Coyote Ugly entertaining place to go?
I think it'll be somewhere in between. Kind of your question, like, is it going to be a big production type, Coyote Ugly, or is it going to be more like people lining up with their med cards? And I think the answer probably is somewhere in between. They're, given the life cycle of this industry, this kind of nascent, Wild West, early, a lot of this is speculation, right? A lot of it is kind of where do we think, what does the crystal ball say? And I think there's definitely we'll call it lounge movement going, of course, made famous mostly by Amsterdam as a market, where I can go into a lounge, it's a coffee shop, and I can buy product, use product, and hang out, right? Kind of like a bar. There's definitely a movement of that coming for a place where you can go and hang and use the product and have an experience, which I think is really exciting. I think what we'll find perhaps more than that is really a nice liquor store, a nice wine store, right, where I can go in and I want to accomplish fill in the blank, right, a guy's golf weekend or a girl's night out or a concert or a party or going to a dinner party. Everybody used to bring a bottle of wine to a dinner party, and now you're seeing people show up with edibles, which I still think is hilarious. But, you get this opportunity where people have a reason that they want to use the product, just as if you want to drink a nice bottle of wine or a nice glass of scotch. And you can go to a place where if I'm an everyday user and I know what I want, I can be in and out. But if I want to rap with somebody about what I'm trying to accomplish and what the best product and method is, I can kind of have that consultative approach, right, where I can go in and say, here's the deal. My wife and I are going out for a nice night. We're not looking to get blitzed. We want to take the edge off, kind of enjoy ourselves, be chill, be mellow. It's a night away from the kids. What do you recommend? And have somebody who has the knowledge, just as you would with a high-end liquor store, to say, what are you trying to accomplish? Do you want to go up? Do you want to go down? Do you want it to be long? Do you want it to be short? And kind of walk you through a product experience and therefore having a customer experience that allows you to walk away and accomplish what you want and therefore become a loyal user. And so I think that's kind of where we're going, is that middle ground, whether it's for recreation or I need help sleeping, or I don't have an appetite, or I've got aches and creaks and pains, or I'm dealing with a bit of anxiety, or whatever your why is, you have an opportunity to have somebody knowledgeable help guide you through the appropriate customer experience.
That makes sense. Okay, so what I've come across, and maybe have something to add to this, but I think what I'm seeing is there's kind of three different segments of people who I'm talking to about this, and there's a lot of sidelining going on because there's just a lot of mystery. There's no historical data, basically. So there's startups who want to launch a business, and then there's investors who want to put it behind a brand who already looks like they know what they're doing, and then there's going concerns and they want to add it to their line of products. If we start with the startups, let's say somebody who wants to just buy a franchise concept and hasn't owned one before, or maybe they have business experience, retail experience, but no cannabis experience. Like, what should they know? How do they know what they're getting into?
Yeah, so this is the nature of why we're doing what we're doing, right, is that retail experience, first of all, I think in franchising, people come in with a certain level of experience, whether you're buying a bar or a coffee shop or a tax preparation company or whatever the case may be, the whole gamut of franchises. And the idea is I either know nothing or I know enough about something adjacent, right? I get retail, but I don't understand this specific application, and franchising gives you that recipe. and the ingredients and the support. The deal is, in cannabis, is that it's really complicated, and some of those complications are driven by the life cycle of the industry, and there is a lot of mystery. Getting a license is complicated. Finding a location is complicated. Navigating kind of the permissions you need and where you can operate at the state level, then the county level, then the state level. I've even heard of the HOA level. So everybody's got their own version of the rules. And then if you're fortunate enough to be able to navigate that to be open, retail experience doesn't always cut it because compliance, and compliance both on the everyday operational side of things and then also navigating the complexities of the tax burden in this industry. And again, the fact that these rules are seen to be a bit of a moving target. So, I say it's complicated. You've probably heard me say that. I say that a lot. I say it about territory checks. I say it to clients all the time. I start a sentence or an answer almost exclusively with, it's complicated, but. And the but usually leads to why we're doing what we're doing. We're providing that fundamental recipe, that core of how to be successful, the systems, the programs based on a decade of doing this, not to reduce the complexities, because that's not going to happen, but to help navigate the complexities and make sure that people can stay safe, remain compliant, and ultimately be profitable.
Yeah, that's actually tremendously useful. There's a lot of dispensaries for sale out there. What would, if people are looking at those dispensaries already, what should they be looking for? And if they're for sale, why would they be for sale? Is there anything in there they should know about?
Yeah, so I think a lot of the sale comes from the fact that when this is new, lots of people got in, right? It seemed cool. Anybody who'd ever seen pot, smelled pot, smoked pot, or grew pot in their dad's basement thought, this is definitely the industry I should be in. The reality is, again, kind of back to the last conversation, it's really difficult to be successful. So you had a lot of people who got the license, which is like holding a piece of gold, and then now they're open, and they go, oh, no, now what, right? Huh. And unlike some industries where, you open and you don't know what you're doing, but nobody really comes in. So ultimately, you don't make a lot of money. Maybe you fail, maybe you don't, but you certainly have bought yourself a job. This industry, you do make money, and lots of it. And so it's so hot right now, and it'll transition into a more kind of status quo, but at this point, it's sexy, it's new, it's hot. People are coming in to explore, to experiment, to figure out what the big deal is. And the reality is, just because you have money coming in the door, especially in an industry where compliance is so complex, doesn't mean you're successful. So you see a lot of people exiting this because they either got in, they made a bunch of millions of dollars, and more than they ever had dreamed that they could make, and they're exiting because they've accomplished their goal and they want to go surf in Costa Rica, or they're exiting because money keeps coming in, but it's going out at an equal pace because they don't understand how to run a business and how to be compliant, or they're just in over their heads. And so with us, we've got a couple of different opportunities for folks, and so we're looking the same way anybody would, right? We call them, in fact, stranded winners is kind of the term we use for them, where the recipe's there, it's just not being executed on. And as a franchisor, we're taking a two-pronged approach. One, we can buy it from them once we do our due diligence. If it's a good location, it just needs to be run properly. We're acquiring those. And we're doing that solely for the purpose of having a menu of options for people who want to get into franchising in this industry but don't want to start from scratch. They don't want to build ground up. And we're going to flip those. Or we're offering the opportunity to join the franchise for the folks who are in it and realize they want to be in it, but they just don't know how to be successful. And so helping those folks with that same recipe and guidance and support and product and stability and continuity and history to turn their stores around.
That's interesting. So there's two things there you said that I think I'd like to ask more about. One of them is the money. There seems to be a lot of money in there. There also seems to be a lot of risk in there. What could you say to that? I mean, I guess it depends on what state you're in, but there's tax things that come up. And so how much can you make?
So the money is crazy in this industry. I think when you read articles or when you do your research, when I first started looking at this opportunity to come on board here with One, I mean, you feel like there's typos, right? I mean, you read some of these numbers and you're like, there's no way, right? That couldn't possibly be the average unit volume for this concept. And then you get into it, and it is. So the money is there. The key is, well, first of all, it takes money to get into this, right? And I'll just give you an example. So, in Denver right now, where your way in really is to buy a business that's for sale, you see businesses that are going for $2, $5, $7, $10 million for one dispensary. It's really insane, and it's based on sales. And so, you have an opportunity here to know what you're getting into. But again, that's that top line number, right? So you have to fully understand the complications of just being compliant. You have to understand the cost of doing business, which if you know what you're doing, your costs are low and your margins are high. But you also have to understand the current tax burden that's in the industry, which I think is what most people can't wrap their minds around. So the 280E tax program is really a program that's biased towards this industry, and there's lots of things going on right now in the government that I think give us all hope that will be changing in the next maybe even 6 to 12 months. But that's what's put a lot of people out of business too, is not understanding how to navigate that. So the money can be huge as long as you know how to play by the rules. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. So with the 280E, I don't know a lot about it, but I as I understand it, if you didn't separate your actual flower, your thing that touched the plant, with everything else in the business, then you could actually be liable. You can't write off anything at all in your entire business because it's related to a Schedule I federal illegal drug. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, that's the basics of it, right? So it's taxed at a different point in your P&L than most normal concepts, allowing you to not write off the cost of doing business, which makes your effective tax rate very, very, very high. There are, I always want to be careful. I always say there's ways around it. It's not around it. There are ways to set up your business to manage things efficiently and effectively so that things go into the proper buckets, to your point, right? So you're separating out the different elements of the business, what is tax deductible versus what's not. Not that point alone, not knowing how to do that, not knowing how to set up your business, not knowing how to build your physical space, not knowing how to set up the operations to be able to maximize your profitability. I mean, that decision alone is something that if you go it alone and you don't understand that, can be a business killer for sure.
Yeah. So as the other thing you said that was interesting there was an acquisition model. You're saying you actually acquire a dispensary that's already running and then apply your infrastructure to raise revenue? Is that what you mean?
Correct. So there's, because this is an expensive industry to get into, and you couple that with the fact that you can't just go get an SBA loan for it, there's no real lending options, what we're finding is that we're attracting a much more savvy buyer that has this ability to either put together investors or have the liquidity themselves to do this. And we've found that a lot in multi-unit operators, both inside and outside of franchising. The common theme with a lot of these potential buyers is they're not going to look at a patch of dirt or a vanilla shell or they're not going to want to or prefer to do that and build ground up. What they will do is come in and buy 1, 2, 10 locations that you can show them have historical data, are profitable, and why we think. So we just bought a dispensary last week. We closed on a dispensary right for a certain price that was doing X. We know their product mix was off. Their owners were non-participating, and their layout was weird. And so we know that we can, blow out a column, fix the layout, change the product mix, change the sign and the marketing, and have real involvement following systems and processes, and increase those sales and increase that brand recognition under our umbrella. Those becomes really attractive opportunities for potential buyers. Not all, and so we won't do it everywhere. Excuse me. Specifically, we're focusing on doing that here in Colorado now. Obviously, it's our home market, and it's easiest for us to do that. But it's a real opportunity for us to help usher folks in. There's a higher price tag on those, but you also have a little bit of comfort with that, kind of historical data and being able to see it, touch it, taste it, opposed to hunting for a new location and hoping you picked the right one.
That's interesting. So did you apply, or are you applying the One Cannabis brand, or just keeping the brand as it was?
No, it'll all be under the One Cannabis brand.
All right. And so if I wanted to come to you and invest in something like the one you just described, what kind of a person would I have to be? Like, what do I need in order to play ball?
Yeah, so, the first answer is the money to do so. Again, not being able to go get a loan. You've got to come with some financial game. And then really, for us, it's about, as we look at multi-unit operators, look at multi-unit franchisees, folks who have a retail background, who understand, the basics of running a store or stores. The cannabis stuff, the expectation is nobody knows that, right? We're a very small niche of people who understand the cannabis side of the business. It's one of the advantages of being the franchisor in this industry, is if you've got the knowledge of how to run a retail location, how to manage a team, how to follow a franchise system, then we do the rest. And so that's kind of our ideal candidate, is somebody who obviously financially is safe, but that we can help set up to be successful, and they can commit to following a process that we've developed over a decade of doing this.
Huh. That's interesting. So how many do you have going right now?
This was number 4. We just closed out last week.
Nice. And those are...
Remember, the resale price ranges from about 1.2 up to, as much as you want to spend.
And that's what they buy them for?
Mm-hmm.
And then is there anything additional needed to put into it to do the fix-up?
So it depends on the location, but yeah, there's a little bit. So, I think this one, and I don't have it in front of me, so don't quote me on this, but.
So if we can go back on the record and talk about anything about this, could you give an industry number average for that stuff, or for, revenue and EBITDA and tax?
Yeah, probably more specifically showing gross sales of $5.3 million. That's our average unit, with a net income of 2.4. So it's pretty insane.
That is insane. And is that something you don't want me to share?
That's in our item 19. So.
Okay. So, but if I write that in an article, is that okay?
Yeah, I think it's item. It's public knowledge in a franchise disclosure document, right? So. Yeah.
Okay. So I talk to a lot of people who want to buy a franchise, right? And they are all. It is the most active link in any email series that goes out. It's the easiest lead capture thing that happens, but almost nobody wants to go pull the trigger because of this sidelining, because of they're mostly sidelining. Even if they can afford it, they're scared to do it. So the point of this is really to add some clarity, and maybe some. It would be great if we had historical data, something that they could go on to add some comfort there, reassurance to people who are just kind of sitting on the sidelines that, they would love to play ball, but they're waiting. What would you say to them?
So it's this is my whole life, right?
Yeah.
How do I sum this up in less than a 7-hour dissertation? So the reality is this industry, for all of its actual safety, because the reality is the things that scare people the most in this industry, they don't really exist, right? They may on paper. But I talk to people every day who talk about, I can't go to jail. I'm like, jail? And then I usually send them a picture of my 3 kids that are 8, 5, and 4. And I'm like, look, man, I'm not going to jail. We all feel pretty good about this, right? So there's there's just some misunderstandings about what the risks in this industry are, right? From that, I feel like if I open this, I might go to jail, which is nonsense. To just not understanding kind of the actual stability that exists in this industry. So we combat that a few different ways. We can't combat the fact that this is federally illegal, right? It is what it is. You go into this eyes wide open or you don't. There is really no getting around that. The people who are waiting are going to be left behind. And I have this conversation a lot, too. I talk to some people in New York all the time, right? Well, as soon as it becomes legal, I'll call you. It will be too late, just so we're all on the same page, right? So, kind of fortune favors the bold, but fortune also favors the prepared, right? So what I encourage people who have an interest to do with us is we go through, franchising is about a dating process before the I do's, right? So we start dating now, not when it becomes legal, now. There's no harm in it. And the objective is to get down that dating road, get to the aisle, walk to the altar, and if you're going to wait somewhere, wait there. Because as soon as it becomes legal, things move really, really quickly. And some states are not doing a very good job. And so sometimes it can move so quickly that you just miss it, right? If you assume that you're coming to Colorado, for example, but you're from out of state, there's a 6-month pre-suitability program that you have to get into to even be eligible to apply for a license, right? So folks go, well, I want to find a location first. Well, locations sell here on the daily, right? I don't know what the average time on market is, but it's not much. It surely isn't 6 months, right? So there's kind of this hesitation that people are having in this industry right now that are costing them the ability to move forward. So, fence sitters, I get it. There is some risk in here. The higher the risk, the higher the reward. The reality is this industry has probably less risk than people think. Much of the risk that still exists is mitigated through a franchise like us. And in the end, just like any business, there's going to be ways you can screw it up, right? And so doing your due diligence, finding the right partner, having the right team, the right legal counsel, the right franchise support, being in the right market, having the right plan that we've all vetted out, and we all being people who know this industry, who know franchising, who know cannabis, put you in the safest position that you could be in. Is it without risk? No, but neither is a coffee shop, right? Neither is a gym, right? Everything has inherent risk in doing a business. And so you're either a trigger puller or you're not, and you have to kind of see where you fall on that scale of risk tolerance. The reward in this industry is greater than anything I've ever seen. And so it kind of depends on what your goals are. And a lot of these guys who want to get that reward, they're jumping in, man. They're going head first. And as long as you go head first with a parachute and a life raft and all the other precautions that you can have, chances are you're going to land safely.
Wow. Okay, so if I wanted to come to you with, say, I had $5 million, no retail experience, but I want to do this, and I'm not in a state that's recreationally legal. Let's say, what would you tell me to do?
I'd say to come to Colorado as quickly as humanly possible.
All right. So in Colorado, you want to launch there.
And the reason I would say that for you in a state that's non-recreational is if you come here, and quickly as possible, because, again, you're out of state, right, so you have to go through pre-suitability. I would start that today, because why not, right? Probably it's $5,000 in legal fees, worth the risk, right? You don't have to move forward. You're out $5,000, so what? But at least if you're putting yourself in a position to be eligible to do this. Then here in Colorado, we have this, again, back to kind of our acquisition strategy, we have a menu. So for your $5 million, are you looking for $2.5 million dispensaries? Do you want one $5 million dispensary? Do you want 5 $1 million dispensaries? We can talk through the pros and cons. By the way, the answer is probably you want one $5 million dispensary. But we can show you what's available. We can show you historical data here, which you can't get in many markets. We can show you our plan. We're vertically integrated in Colorado, which of course we can't cross state lines, so we supply the product. Our support team is here. So folks who want to get into this as safely as possible, it doesn't matter where you're at, coming here to Colorado with us right now, that's the safest way. There are lots of other opportunities outside of that, but that's the safest way, especially if you're in a state that doesn't have rec.
Okay. So would you do this in any other states?
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's good opportunity depending on where you are. So Oklahoma wrote some of the most liberal medical-only laws around. Now, you have to be a resident. I think 75% of the ownership has to be an Oklahoma resident, so that obviously takes away anybody who's not in Oklahoma. But licenses are easy to get. And so there's a real opportunity there if you live there, and we can certainly help, secure the license, secure the location, get you up and running in medical. The assumption is if you're up and running in medical, you'll be first in line for rec. And so medical states are not bad. First of all, there's a lot of money in that also. Obviously, your market is much, much larger when it comes to rec. But starting medical is a smart move as well. And then, anticipating what's about to happen. Michigan went. There's opportunities there. There's some difficulties that the state has created, but there's opportunities there. A lot of people in the industry think that New Jersey is going to go in a matter of days. And the second New Jersey does, New York's not going to let that tax revenue cross the river, right? So New York is right behind it. Florida went with a really silly system that is not moving the system forward or the industry forward at all, and to such a way that they'll have to course correct. So every state has their things, right? LA has 1,000 dispensaries, but only 179 of them are legal. Well, they have a problem. That's going to take a while to get past. There's a social equity program in a couple of different counties that are focusing on giving license to people who make certain criteria, essentially people who are affected on the quote-unquote war on drugs, right? You're looking at minorities and impoverished areas. If you have a record based on especially a marijuana-related charge, it actually helps your application. It's kind of funny to think of that. So there's social equity programs. So, the list goes on and on. The opportunity is so diverse. It's really about where you are, what you're trying to accomplish, how much you have to spend, what your risk tolerance is, how quickly you're trying to make money, what money you're trying to make, right? There's a whole kind of a recipe that puts together, and if there was some fancy algorithm, I'm sure it's, answer these 55 questions and then it'll spit out an answer. It's a bit more archaic than that, but there's lots of opportunities all over, including Canada and other countries as well. Although at some point we just have to focus because you and I know each other at least well enough to know that I'm like, there's like 31 countries and Canada just went national and I can sell Canada, and at some point you have to take a breath and go, let's start in Denver. Right.
So so Canada, when you start to cross the border, now you're into the federal or international law. Are you able to even get over the border?
Yeah, so Canada is going to provide a lot of opportunity for us. In fact, in franchising, they're a little bit down the road, and but the same thing. Like they're doing things essentially by province. Ontario went with a lottery, which again took the industry as like ready, set, go. Now come to a screeching halt. And so it's just like we are with states here. Like everything's a little bit different. So people go, well, gosh, it's nationally legal there. That's probably the low-hanging fruit. It's not, and enough about franchising, that Canada's never low-hanging fruit for franchising. It's very difficult, but certainly there is lots of opportunity. You bet.
Yeah. Okay. That sounds good. All right. So, where do you see the best business opportunities in the whole business? I've gone all the way from I've been talking to founders and CEOs from farms and even manufacturers in CBD, e-commerce, and all the way up to dispensaries, and trying to get a whole lay of the land. I have a couple coming up for compliance, so some attorneys and even online or payment processors. I mean, software and analytics, and all the aspects are pieces, Lego pieces that seem to be in the game. If you considered everything you know about everything across the supply chain, do you see any business opportunities or obvious advancements that need to occur where you think the best business opportunities are? I'm sure there's a bunch, but what would you say to that?
There's so many. So, as a vertically integrated company here, we're very, very good at cultivation. We've won Cannabis Cup a bunch of times. I mean, we grow excellent weed. We're very, very good at running dispensaries and very good at franchising, and so we're good on that part. We don't participate in that middle extraction, kind of area, mostly because it just became really saturated really quick, and as we're starting to get into it with everybody else, we went, wait, we're really good at this, and we're really good at this. Let's just go let these guys be really good at this, right? I think it's probably one of the smartest things we've done. There's opportunity. People are still inventing things here, right? Which is astounding. There's no. I say this a lot in the franchise world because we're really pioneering this. You see lots of different. But I just said this in my Dealmakers speech last week. There's lots of different spins of things, right? The new way to do burgers, the new way to go down and order pizza like you do at Subway and Chipotle. That became a thing for a minute. It still is. The new spin on coffee shops and the new additives in smoothies and the new, way to bring a competitive environment to a gym scenario. These are all great things in franchising right now, but they're new spins on existing industries. So we're excited about being the first new industry into franchising. But what that to circle back to your question, I promise, what that leads to is the fact that people are literally inventing things. You go to the big MJ BizCon in Vegas, and there was new ways to use the product, new science, new technology to extract the product. The oils that people are using are becoming pretty common now in these pens, right? So it's not just about smoking out of a bowl or a joint anymore. There's so many different ways to consume the product through different versions of edibles, to these oils and these vape pens and ways that, I'll be honest, I walk into our dispensary, I don't know what half the stuff is, to be honest. Now, I'm probably not our biggest target, but, there's so many new opportunities to consume the same product that there's more ways to get into this than could ever possibly be, actually executed as this stabilizes. That's not even thinking about compliance and the back-end technologies for compliance and regulation and those kinds of things. So there is lots of ways to dive into this pool. As things start to free up, we feel, obviously, that dispensaries, retail, getting the product to the consumer is really the future of this industry, right? Once you can cross state lines with products, that changes the landscape drastically on a cultivation side, especially if you can go across international borders. So that's going to make a tremendous difference for those who are on the cultivation side. In the end, the consumers are always going to need the product. So if you build the most robust, the best, the most efficient, the most customer-centric dispensary retail outlet around, we feel obviously that is the most stable, the most reliable, and the biggest potential as we continue to evolve into this industry.
Okay. So what kind of dispensary is it that you are kind of rubber stamping, if you will, or franchising? I've seen luxury branding down and higher prices, and I've seen the ones that just want to get the most potent for the cheapest dollar, lower end stuff, top shelf, kind of if you compare it to clubs and bars. Which one's really taking off faster, or is there one, and which one are you?
Yeah, so I think when this first became legal, prior to it becoming legal, people used to get weed in like some weird guy's basement, right? And so the first dispensaries looked like that weird dude's basement. They were in weird alleys and had, they were very raw. A lot of them felt dangerous. They really didn't have kind of that social norm standard level of acceptance, right? They were just like, it was a place to get weed. But that's changed for lots of reasons. One, that's not sustainable. But the buyer has changed. There was an article that came out a long time ago that Christian, our founder, was, quoted as, we affectionately call it the soccer mom project. And what we mean by that is that the buyer now it's just us. It's just normal people. You sit in front of a dispensary, and I think the fear when this became legalized is that a bunch of druggies and potheads and criminals were going to be coming to the retail shop nearest you. And it first of all, that never happened. But even now, it's more standardized, right? It's the grocery store, the liquor store, and the dispensary of people who are making decisions about what comes into the home, both recreationally and even medicinally. And so the stores have to reflect that. So to your end, because it's new and sexy and interesting, especially in markets like Vegas, you've got these crazy high-end, poshy, 50,000 square foot, just bizarro, bigger-than-life type of dispensaries. It's fine, right? It'll be a fad. Those things, as this normalizes, there's always going to be some element of kind of marijuana tourism in markets like a Vegas or even maybe a New York or something. But the suburbs, the normal cities, it's just going to be a good experience, just like any other franchise. Customer focus. We're doing a tremendous amount of focus and case studies and focus groups on what customers want to buy. Our brand is very focused on community, very focused on kind of nature, natural components of the industry, exposed wood, those kinds of things. Kind of a lot of dispensaries went the way of the Apple Store, and in focus groups, that's not really what people want. They want more of that Whole Foods, REI, natural. They want to be able to see it, touch it, taste it, really have a shopping experience, and also have a knowledgeable staff that can guide them through, as we were talking about earlier, what that product experience may be. And so for us, it's really that customer-centric, really high-end product. Again, we've won a bunch of cannabis comps. We're excellent at the weed part of it. You have to have good product. People fly in to get some of our strains. So a focus on quality, a focus on customer service, a focus on community, and really kind of being a part of that community, not only just the customer base, but the surrounding community as well, as that stigma begins to and continues to change, is really important for us.
Okay, so you're building each, correct me if I'm wrong, so each one that you put, that you kind of release or put your brand on is going to be about what community it's actually located in, or is there sort of a price range if you were to compare them to other retail, if we just do bars, you have the lower price point, the middle price point, the high price point.
I would say we're upper middle. This is definitely not the 25-cent pitcher college town bars, right?
Okay.
But it's also not that unattainable luxury brand that you're paying so much for the stools that you can hardly afford the product. This is I think a consumer reachable type of attainable type of a high-end product.
Gotcha. Okay. So high quality, maybe since this is it's an adult place to go. High quality.
Yeah.
Okay, good. But it's not that out of the ordinary $1,000 bottle champagne or anything. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
That makes sense. All right. Well, that's very informative. What would you like people to know? Anything left out here? What's like the biggest blind spot or thing that people really are going to want to know here?
Yeah, I think this seems like an industry that's impenetrable for a lot of people. I think everybody thinks I always say everybody, that's clearly not true. I think a lot of people think it's cool, it's sexy, it's the future, it's here, it's whatever the buzzword is. But I think a lot of people, especially investors, don't know how to break in. To your point of kind of the fear of the fence sitter, I think that's a really valid point. I know you see that a lot. We see that a lot. And so, we have, it's a little bit tacky probably, but, we talk a lot about, as a plan, our name, One for All, cannabis for all. And we're really serious about that, and it's really about accessibility. Look, people hate cannabis. People hate liquor. People hate coffee. Fine. This is not a masses thing. It doesn't have to be a masses thing. But the people who want to partake in a latte or a glass of scotch or a glass of wine or a bowl at the end of the day, we want to have accessibility from a customer standpoint to come in and have a great customer and product experience. So that accessibility. And from an investor standpoint, understanding that it's complicated as hell to get into this industry. And so there are now, finally, for the first time, systems and processes and teams and partnerships that are available to help mitigate some of that scary stuff about the industry. And I think getting that message across for people to understand that there is a way where these barriers are not eliminated but lowered, and that we're helping to usher people into this very exciting, unbelievably profitable and cool industry. I think that's really kind of the biggest drum that I beat the most. You've heard me talk about it, and we talk about it. We just talked about it at IFA. We're talking about IFE. We're talking about it. We just talked about it at Dealmakers in Vegas. This is our message: is that we're here. It's available. You now have a way into this industry to be safer, to mitigate a lot of that risk, to set yourself up to be a profitable and compliant business in an industry that is, somebody said the other day, boy, you guys are just like day one post-prohibition. That's cool. And I thought that concept was cool, but it's incorrect. We are not even post-prohibition yet, right? We're ahead of that. And so it's that time where savvy people are going to get in and realize success that I don't think many of us, if any of us, have seen, especially in franchising, in a very, very, very long time.
That's a good point. So I have been calling it post-prohibition, but that's a good point that it's federally still not legal. So what do you think it's going to happen in 2 years? And when it does, obviously there's going to be a flood. Is there a bubble coming? Oh, there's got to be a bubble. There's going to be a bunch of idiots. I'm sure something's going to happen where something. How long do you think it's going to be, and what do you think is going to happen once that federally legal thing passes?
That's such a loaded question. Well, that's a good question. It's a question that everybody asks. I mean, the reality is nobody knows, right? I think aggressively people think in the next 18 to 24 months it'll be federally legal. I think conservatively people think 5-6 years. There's certainly a group of people who think it'll never be federally legal, which I think is just flat wrong. So, but I think in the coming years it will become federally legal. The States Right Act bill. I'm not saying that doesn't sound right, but anyways, that it is kind of careening its way through the government right now that Trump has said he will sign. That's going to free up some funding. That's going to free up banking. At that point, people are going to care a whole lot less about federal legalization, to be honest with you, because some of the big barriers, no funding, no banking, are going to be removed, if not greatly eased. And so, there's so many things. The Farm Bill that passed last year, I mean, these things are all kind of indicating where we're heading. We're just trying to stay ahead of it. And so we are not quite through this prohibition. But from a state level, like in Colorado, you wouldn't know that, right? It's, our money gets taken to a bank. My paycheck comes from Chase Bank. It seems relatively normal. When it does federalize, I think a bunch of things are going to happen. I think probably the most vulnerable, this is strictly, of course, my opinion, but the most vulnerable segment of this industry at that point is going to be cultivation. Because right now you can build an empire in a state, and the big guys can't get to you because you can't cross state lines, right? As soon as those barriers go down, I think cultivation is going to be really, really interesting. Getting the product to the consumer, we're building a brand in an industry that doesn't have any branding, which is crazy to think about. I was just at multi-unit, and you're talking to guys that have 30, 100, 500, 800 units themselves. The biggest chain in this industry is 37. Right? So there is no brand in this industry yet. We are building, with franchising as a growth vehicle, we'll eclipse that number probably in the next 6-9 months. And then to build a brand in an industry that is otherwise 100% mom and pop, for all the pros and cons that come along with that, is crazy. And that's not going to change with federal legalization, although it'll become more accessible.
Yeah. So, okay, the really big players, right? I don't know how much they're sidelining, but it seems like they can see at a level that we don't have eyes, right? So I don't know what were they called? What's the brand that owns Corona? What is it? The company that owns Corona that just bought Canopy Growth?
Constellation.
Yeah, Constellation. Do you know what's going to come of that? I mean, they're going to wait till it's federally legal and then just put it in all the bars? Is that what you think is going to happen?
I don't know. I mean, even as it becomes federally legal, there's still going to be a lot of restrictions. I don't know that they'll be able to mix it with bars. Maybe not. I think there's, again, pros and cons to that. I think it's really just about the investment of the industry, whether it merges, how much or whether it merges with the actual bar scene or booze scene. I don't think is even the point. I think the federal legalization will invite in the big players, that Philip Morris, big tobacco, big alcohol, and others, big pharma, that currently now, even though there has been some big investments, they're still pretty sidelined, right? Because they can't do anything. National distribution doesn't matter. Producing elsewhere and bringing it in doesn't matter. So some of the things that make them are irrelevant in this industry right now. Once they become relevant, certainly they're going to jump in, and certainly it's going to change the landscape.
Wow.
By then, one will be by far the biggest brand in the world, and who cares?
Yeah. I see it. It's coming. So cannabis and CBD, there's shops out there that are just going all in on CBD because it's easier, and probably hoping to transition into full, THC also. What do you see happening? It might happen to those. What's your feeling on CBD stuff?
I think CBD is interesting. I think it's like hemp, and some of the things that have happened there. As a sidebar, Denver just decriminalized psychedelic mushrooms. Did you see that?
Wow, I didn't see that. What?
Dude, it's so ridiculous. Anyways, but with hemp and CBD, I think what you're seeing is indicators, because you nailed it. It's easier to do that. There's a lot of guys that are going all in CBD and opening CBD stores. The interesting thing with CBD is it's kind of everywhere. And so, am I going to go to a CBD store when I can get it at Walgreens or my chiropractor or, I don't know. I don't know the answer. There's a lot of people that are smarter than me that are opening stores, so maybe. Yeah. But I think it's just kind of that foot in the door. But there's absolutely no guarantees that things are going to free up and combine those two industries. I think people think, well, CBD and dispensaries, those are the same thing. They're not the same thing. Could those be kind of combined into that one-stop shop? Maybe. But if you're putting, $1 million in it, banking on that happening, I think that's risky. I think you either own CBD for what it is, or you don't. I think it's too widespread. I think it got so big, so quick, and it's so kind of commoditized already because it's absolutely everywhere that from our standpoint, I think the advantage is people are starting to speak the language, and they're starting to understand what it means to have a product with THC and without, and so people are starting to have some familiarity, and then being able to distinguish, well, if this is good, perhaps this is better, which I think will lead to benefit to our segment of this industry.
Yeah, that's a good point. I did worry about that. There's franchises in CBD, and like you said, it's available in Walmart, and it's kind of scary what might happen there if all you sell is CBD. Yeah, you might.
Yeah, there are a lot of people that do. I don't see the sex appeal to it personally.
Yeah. absolutely more exciting to go into the THC, and also a lot of unknowns there. So you offer the blueprint, and how can people find you, and to kind of peel back the curtain and see what your blueprint looks like?
Yeah, so like any good franchise, I always tell people we're a really normal franchise in a really abnormal industry. So because of the way we put this together, between Mike and I, over 30 years of franchise experience, not cannabis guys, franchise guys. And then Christian having one of the very first legal dispensary experiences and his team, and then our cultivation side, as long as we've been doing that and winning awards. And when you start to put together all of our team, I think you really understand the depth of the bench on all aspects of this business. But on the franchise side, as far as how do you peel back the curtain, it's pretty normal, right? I mean, you inquire. We take you through a mutual investigation process. We work through some of the complexities of licensing and timing and those kinds of things. But other than that, we go through disclosure documents. We kind of go through that dating process to get to know one another, and we get to the altar. And if we like each other, we move forward. And if we don't, we don't. But we move into this just like any other industry, any other concept, and any other franchise. We move through this mutual investigation to make a decision on whether or not this is a good fit for both of us. And typically our goals are aligned. Are we the right concept for them? Are they the right concept for us? Is it the right time? Is it the right place? Are they capitalized enough to stay safe? And we all have a plan so that we're rowing in the same direction. And when you build a brand that way, you have a safe and expanding system that's going to help use franchising to continue to build the brand in different markets.
Wow, okay. If somebody listening to this interview wants to come out and tour your 118,000 square foot grow facility, and they go to cannabis10x.com/onecannabis, then they can get a $500 voucher to fly out there and tour the facility and take a look at the franchising model. Is that right?
Yeah.
So they got to qualify first, obviously.
Yeah.
All right. So,
yep.
All right. Okay. So it's cool.
Awesome.
All right, man. I really appreciate this.
Yeah, I appreciate you. If I get anything else to help you, let me know.
I will do. Thank you. Have a good one.
You bet. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Cannabis10x.com. Business opportunities in the burgeoning post-prohibition cannabis industry to help investors, startups, and existing companies find their footing in the booming cannabis industry on Cannabis10x.com.
Just